Every day I get a little bit closer to thinking that Subaru is just trolling us. On May 30th, 2024, they revealed the WRX TS. And while it seems like it's going to be a really great car, it's not what we actually want. And the TS in the car's name stands for Tuned by STI, which is so ironically close to the true WRX STI model that we have been begging Subaru for. And by coming out with all these special versions of the WRX, like the GT, the TR, and now the TS, Subaru is diluting the WRX brand and basically getting ready for the day where they cut that model altogether. And I think this is a massive mistake. Now, before we dive into the issues that I have with the current WRX, let's explain why this model is so important for Subaru in the first place. It's important to note that Subaru has a long history in rally racing dating back to the 1970s and 1980s. And by participating in rally racing, it helped Subaru develop a lot of technology that made their road cars better, like getting to test out turbocharged engines in all-wheel drive. During the 1990s, Subaru would launch what I think is one of their most important models, the Impreza, a compact economy car meant to compete with some of its Japanese rivals like the Toyota Corolla and the Honda Civic. And while the Impreza was a good mass market economy car, there was growing demand for kind of these sporty compact vehicles. So in 1992, Subaru launched the WRX. WRX stands for World Rally Experimental, and its big differentiator over the normal Impreza was a turbocharged 2-liter boxer engine that made around 240 horsepower for the Japanese domestic market. And while the first generation WRX was never directly sold in the United States, it was tremendously popular in the markets that it was sold in. Just a couple years later, in 1994, Subaru would launch the Impreza WRX STI, and this car would basically turn everything up another notch. More power, better suspension, stronger transmission, and more aggressive styling. And these cars would prove to be ultra successful in rally racing, with the Impreza being one of the most decorated models of all time, winning something like 46 rallies. Subaru would continue refining the WRX and STI until ultimately coming out with the second generation car in 2001. While this car stayed true to the same basic formula, it got a controversial styling makeover, and the first iteration was deemed the Bug-Eye. With this second generation car, Subaru started to push it into new markets, and this was the first WRX model that was sold in the United States, with the STI version then following in 2004. And to quickly circle back to the styling, Subaru must have been very well aware of the complaints that they were getting about the way this car looked, because it was facelifted 3 different times in its 6-year model run. But regardless of how it looked, this car had a massive impact on automotive culture here in the US. The third generation of the WRX would roll out in 2007, and although there were some minor controversies surrounding this car, it would stay pretty true to the WRX's roots. In 2015, the WRX and STI would be divorced from the Impreza, meaning that they were now their own standalone model and not just simply a trim option on the Impreza. That being said, the WRX and STI were still based on the Impreza. This new generation would also bring a new engine into the WRX for the first time with the introduction of the FA. Previously, all WRXs and STIs had had versions of the EJ engine. Now, for the purposes of this discussion, the FA and EJ are extremely similar, both being turbocharged boxer 4-cylinder engines, but just know that hardcore Subaru enthusiasts do have some strong opinions about them. And lastly, there would be a new WRX model launched in 2022 with the STI version being discontinued. And we're going to expand on that in just a moment, but first I just want to touch on the overall impact that the WRX had. As with many affordable performance cars, the aftermarket really embraced the WRX and STI. There is a nearly endless parts catalog available for these cars, and it also helped that they were relatively easy to work on and parts were also interchangeable. And while the EJ powertrains certainly weren't the most robust, having a factory turbocharged engine meant that you could easily turn up the boost and drastically increase power. And having 4 doors and all-wheel drive meant that you could basically drive this car anywhere and do just about anything. And just on a personal note, I have really idolized the WRX and the STI for a long time. I would say from the ages of maybe 15 to 19-ish, a 2004 WRX STI was my absolute dream car. And it even led to me purchasing my first Subaru, an Outback XT, which admittedly I was settling for because I couldn't find a clean WRX in my price range. One of my good friends at the time had a World Rally Blue bug-eye WRX slammed on XXRs, and it was probably the coolest car in our whole high school. I'll just say overall, Subaru had a very pivotal role in my early years of car enthusiasm. But I also think it's worth touching on maybe some of the less flattering parts of this car's culture, because I think it's something that the Subaru brand is very well aware of. Somewhere along the line, there is this persona that developed of the Subaru bro, somebody whose personality revolved around driving a WRX, wearing a flat brim Monster Energy hat, and vaping. And there's probably been about 1,000 memes made about this, and people love to joke, but at its core, I do think there is a tiny grain of truth here. And I think it's also something that Subaru is trying as hard as possible to run in the opposite direction of. And that's because Subaru as a brand has really evolved over the past 2 decades. When they first came out with the WRX, or even when they first brought it to the United States, Subaru was kind of viewed as this quirky, oddball automaker. Their brand kind of had this split persona between granola, earthy, crunchy types and the Subaru bros that I mentioned earlier. But they have worked tirelessly to redefine themselves as a company that makes cars for what I would call kind of the outdoorsy urbanist type. And in this quest to redefine themselves, the product that they have really focused on making are spacious, economical, all-wheel drive cars with good ground clearance. And this rebranding has been pretty successful, with Subaru now ranking within the top 10 automakers for sales in the US pretty consistently every year. And a key part of this rebranding has been distancing themselves from that Subaru bro reputation. And I think this is more clear than ever now, with them watering down the current generation of the WRX, discontinuing the STI, and the rumors are now swirling that they're also going to discontinue the BRZ, which is their only other performance car. And it's also important to note that Subaru's presence in rally racing has also dramatically decreased, with them not even competing in WRC since 2008. If I had to kind of draw a comparison to what Subaru was trying to become, they are really trying to do what Toyota did in the early to mid 2000s. Just focus on producing as many economical, reliable, mass market production cars as possible, and really put performance cars on the back burner. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into how they have watered down the WRX, and we'll start with how they have discontinued the WRX STI model. Subaru has made a variety of excuses as to why they have made this decision, but really the key point that they usually hit on are regulations. They think that emissions and fuel economy standards are changing so quickly that this current generation of the WRX will be fairly short-lived, so it wouldn't even make sense for them to come out with a full-fledged STI version. But what they usually don't mention is just Subaru's decreased interest in motorsport and the STI's declining sales. Another way in which the new WRX has been underwhelming is with its power figures. The current model that is on sale today only got a 3 horsepower increase over the outgoing generation, which in today's car market is pretty much unheard of. To put it in context, today's WRX only has 271 horsepower. If we go back all the way to 2002, that WRX made 228 horsepower. A little over a 40 horsepower increase over the course of 22 years is just not acceptable to a lot of enthusiasts. And the last gripe that many of us have with the new WRX is Subaru's attempt to funnel people towards the CVT transmission. Admittedly, Subaru has smartened up on this a bit recently with the TR and TS models, But let's talk about what they tried to do at this car's launch. When this new model came out, the top performance trim was the WRX GT. It got things like adaptive dampers and Recaro seats and was the clear choice for hardcore Subaru enthusiasts. But the catch was that Subaru made this GT trim only available with a CVT transmission. And this was a clear misstep by Subaru, which is why I think they have pivoted with some of these new performance models. And like I mentioned in the intro, the newest of these special trims is the TS, the WRX that is tuned by STI. Now, let it be known that I think all of the enhancements that Subaru made with this car are great, even if it does just kind of seem like a GT with a manual transmission and an updated interior. Regardless, I am still here for it. But how they decided to market this car as a WRX tuned by STI, I think that is a bit silly. It honestly reminds me of what they did with the BRZ TS. Since the BRZ launched in 2013, enthusiasts had been begging Subaru to come out with a true STI version. A BRZ with a turbocharged engine and more grip, but all we ever got from Subaru were excuses and refusals. The best we ever ended up getting was the BRZ TS, again tuned by STI. This car did get more grip and more aggressive styling, but no increase in power. And it does seem a little bit like Subaru is now trying to play this same game with the WRX. And the reason why I think this is so silly is because enthusiasts immediately see right through it. You can put an STI badge on something and say that it's tuned by the STI team, but anyone with even a basic knowledge of the brand that is going to recognize that STI badge and it's going to mean something to them is going to see this as a cheap marketing ploy. So that kind of brings us back to the key issue at play here. Should Subaru be selling a WRX STI model currently? And I think the answer to that is a resounding yes. Now, if you were to ask the accountants at Subaru, they would tell you that this car did not sell in high enough quantities to justify a new generation. But this is just such a fundamental misunderstanding of what the STI is. This car is meant to be Subaru's halo car. And automakers don't sell a halo car to be profitable on its own, although it can be profitable if you build the right car. A halo car is meant to be a poster car, something aspirational, something that creates excitement around the brand. I can almost guarantee you that no 14-year-old is going to be putting up a poster of a Subaru Ascent on their wall. A halo car is meant to be the type of car that I dreamed about in high school, and that ultimately led me to buying another car in that automaker's lineup that is maybe a little bit more realistic. And for Subaru, who is now a highly successful automaker, this should be something that they understand. As for what this new generation STI should look like, that's really up to Subaru. I really don't think that regulations are a valid excuse for Subaru, seeing as Toyota just launched a brand new model in this segment with the introduction of the GR Corolla. If there was the willpower at Subaru, they could just take the WRX, tune the engine up a little bit, beef up the transmission, tweak the suspension, maybe take a little bit of weight out and put some more aggressive styling on the car, and they would have a new STI, which is how they have been making the STI all along. Or if they wanted to go a different route altogether and be super forward-looking, it wouldn't be my first choice, but they could be the first to come out with a hybrid in this segment. And the technology that they develop while producing this car could be applicable to a bunch of other models in the Subaru lineup, which is how a lot of other automakers develop new technology. Overall, my main point here is just that I think a lot of enthusiasts who have been fans of the Subaru brand for a long time are growing a little bit frustrated. It seems that a lot of the people who would be really excited to buy a new WRX STI are instead going out and buying Golf Rs or GR Corollas. I think Subaru has an opportunity to supercharge the excitement around their brand and get an entire new generation of car enthusiasts excited about Subaru. It does seem like Subaru is pretty content to just ignore this part of their fan base and continue making a ton of money, selling mass market economy cars, but I really do think it is a missed opportunity that Subaru will grow to regret.